All right, guys, the following is a replay of the live stream I just did with the free side of my paid group at pwchuntsquad.com. In the future, these are going to be live on all my social media platforms. You don't need to be part of the group, but in order to participate in the gear giveaways and to submit questions that we directly answer and talk about on the live streams, you got to get on the network and sign up. Now, having said that, you're going to see them on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, X. Everywhere you see me on social media, these live streams are going to be there in the future. So join me, listen in. They're a ton of fun for me to do, and I feel like I'm providing a lot of value because it gives me a chance to directly answer questions that you guys have, and I can do a little back and forth via the chat, any of that. So it's just a good way to dynamically approach this stuff, help you guys on your hunting endeavors. This particular one is focused on elk hunting questions. We're in the middle of elk season, so that didn't surprise me. But on a lot of these, I'll bring in a guest, I'll approach other species, anything hunting and fishing related. We'll go down that path. Let's jump right in. All right, guys, so I wanted to mention that I'm having these custom skinning knives made. These are called Cliff Skinner. I've got a whole bunch of reasons why I've had this knife made the way that it's made. Got a short video on the website. The details are there. pursuitwithcliff.com. Click in the corner up by shop. You'll see Cliff Skinner. Click that puppy. You'll get all the details. Oh yeah, so you know what I thought would be cool before I dive into people's questions? I just got done with basically 40 days of guiding. I used a bunch of new gear. Some of it I loved, some of it I didn't. Nothing I necessarily hated, but I figured I'd go over some. And I'll tell you guys, if I got some inherent, incentive on this, I'll be totally transparent. Some of this stuff, I do have a relationship with the companies. Some of it I don't. But one thing, let's see here, guys, that I used a ton and I was super surprised about. Let's see, I could show you guys these boots here. If any of you guys are into barefoot boots, oh yeah, first, the disclaimer, on the Jim Green boots, no, I have no relationship with them at all. Other than I am a fan. I watched the Rose Anvil channel, and I think he worked with Jim Green. And Jim Green has always done safari boots. They're, within the South African crowd, they're not an unknown name by any means. Within like the Western hunting world, at least I was never accustomed to hearing about them. They weren't, in my circle of gear or whatever. So they're new to me. But yeah, no relationship with them other than I watched the Rose Anvil YouTube channel. He does a bunch of boot reviews and that sort of thing. And then I am somewhat obsessed with doing the whole barefoot thing when I can. And so here you guys go. Let me show you these puppies. And I got to show them to you because I end up wearing them. I thought I was going to wear these puppy. There we go. I thought I was going to wear these, maybe for a couple low-key elk hunts. You can see there's blood on them and they need to be cleaned. But this is about that's like 30 days of hunting on them, or maybe 25 days, because I did use my other boots. Still in pretty good shape. I haven't done anything, cleaned them up or anything like that. There's a little bit like of non-structural wear on the back here. You can see where like this is peeling up before the stitching. I think all that is some adhesive they hold that down with, but it's a totally non-structural thing. They're in great shape. They're just a little nasty right now, sitting over elk, caping elk and that sort of thing. So anyways, on those, if you guys are into barefoot boots, some takeaways. Those things, I'll do the cons first. All the barefoot boots, if you're packing heavy weight, so the minute you have meat in your pack, if you're backpacking a camp, they suck. This just is what it is. I mean, think about it. If you guys are used to, backpack hunting, and whenever you get a heavy pack with all your camp in it, or you've got your camp stuff and then you got a bunch of meat in your pack too, you get this like compression in your sole. At least it feels that way in the sole of your boot. Even like a real heavy like a full shank type of mountaineering boot that compresses. It feels like it's compressing, and it's worse with these Jim Green boots because obviously it's correlated to the fact that it's a very minimal sole, right? And there's no arch support in there. That's the whole barefoot thing. So it's not like a fault or anything, but it's just a reality of that style of boot. So in that regard, I would view them as pretty poor. Having said that, I packed out, elk quarters, elk heads and capes, like 50, 60 pound packs for a mile, 3/4 of a mile, mostly downhill, no problem. They work fine, on big day hunts. And so I used them for that. They weren't ideal, but I did like them. Now, one thing that was very surprising to me about them was they were pretty good in pretty rugged terrain, which that really struck me. I wasn't like up mountain goat guiding with them or anything like that. And I think on those type of hunts, I would still go with like my mountaineer type of hunting boot. I use Hanwag Alaskan GTXs, and I think I'd probably still wear those. But man, like a lot of this, canyon country, pretty rugged country where it's, you're going on flat stuff, but then you go into some structure up and down. They were good. They were super comfortable. And then what's weird is moving down terrain. I actually found that I would go down it differently. Instead of side heeling on my ankles, like, side heeling on my ankles, like, here's the flat like this, I would end up going straight down a lot. And these things have a big, wide toe box on them. You guys can see that. They kind of almost look like a clown shoe. And that allows you, when you go down, to kind of use your toes to stop you. It's amazing. There's no sales pitch, guys. It's just kind of, it just is what it is. I'm surprised, how much broadening your toes, you can kind of go down, and you have pretty good control, even with a pack on. So huge fan of that component of them, or just they were above expectations on that. The other thing about them, 100% you can be much quieter in them because you know where your sole is. So a mountaineering boot, a heavy boot with a big heavy sole on it, if you do much hunting and you're cognizant of trying to be quiet, everything was so dry. I was guiding in northern New Mexico the last 10 days, basically up until 3 days ago. Super dry. It felt like summer still. There's flies and bees and everything else. It's crazy. I've never seen it like that. I mean, this is in the mountains, 7,000, 8,000 feet. But everything is dry. So you're trying to be quiet all the time. Those type of boots where there's minimal sole, it's way easier to be quiet. Yeah, relative to a big, heavy soled boot. So those are the big pros of that. Yeah, Woodlander says, I have had a pair of gym greens for 4 years, wear them for work, lasted a long time. Yeah, good to hear, man. So that's one piece of gear. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. I'll go over a couple things. I'll just do this real quick. Let's see here. All right, so Worksharp stuff. Again, I have no formal agreement with Worksharp. I have affiliate codes on the website, on YouTube videos. If you click those, I get a commission. They did send me, so guys, in the description of this video, there's a bunch of my affiliate, or like discount codes. There's one for Onyx, there's one for SIG, and I'm going to talk about SIG a little bit. And then there's one for my knives and merchandise on my store, just on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. And those codes are all there. Mine might not be there. And mine is just for the group. It's PWC group. PWC group, one word. It's 10% off on my knives and my sharpener on there. And then, there's an Onyx one and a SIG one. But anyways, the Worksharp guys gave me one. I don't know if it's active yet, but it will be through the holidays. It's 20% off, and it's Cliff G, all one word. But anyways, I ended up using this quite a bit. This is the Montana Knife Company version of their sharpener. I don't even know if you can get it on the Worksharp sharpener website, but it's a little bit, sorry guys, it's a little bit longer. It's longer than their standard field sharpener, and I kind of like that. And the plate is not the ceramic. The sharpening plate here is a little bit lower grit, and so I did find myself using that a lot on their website. This one I still use a lot too, just their normal field sharpener. So just a note that I use them almost all the time. And man, for some reason, and people don't, I get so much feedback about oh, like, you know, you sharpen your knives too much, Cliff, or whatever. All I gotta say is, I mean, I was guiding, I don't know. I mean, I've caped 5 bulls, 6 bulls over the last 2 weeks, and every guy I was with had to sharpen his knife. Maybe it's just rutting bulls that got mud, piss, and their hair is basically like sandpaper. But I don't know a guy. I mean, like, you know, Havalons, Havalons, you know, the razor edge knives, they're awesome, but you're going through blades a bunch if you use those, which I'm not dogging on. I'm just saying, like, you have to go through them. And if you got fixed blades, you gotta sharpen. I don't know, like, I always get this feedback on the internet that, oh, I don't ever need to sharpen. It's like, well, you must be skinning a different elk than me or the 10 other guys that I guide with, because everybody's got to sharpen their knife or at least touch it up a few times on those dirty rutting elk. But anyways, just to clarify on this, these ones I like the best from Worksharp. They're the easiest to use if you want a guided sharpener. This one, this little one here, this is a new one. It's like a pocket sharpener. I like it, guys, but, and I made a video because I was excited about it, but it has some durability issues. And so I would just be wary of that. If you're careful with it, fine. But if you start putting a lot of pressure on it, I noticed that the plate will start to pop up. Let's see here. Like this ceramic plate, if you're putting a lot of pressure on it as you use it, it'll pop, the end will pop up. I've actually super glued this one back on. So just something to keep in mind. It's nice that it's small, but these are more durable. And then, you know, and then I have my own sharpener, guys. And this one here, it's not guided. So if you want a guided sharpener, use those Worksharp ones. If you don't want a guided sharpener, this thing has been, I've been like field testing it the last, the last month. I had it made. So it's kind of goofy, but let me give you guys it's not goofy. It looks goofy, right? But what it is ceramic rod, and then it's inside a tube. And then this is essentially the handle that you see on a pole spear, on the, you know, like for spear fishing. And what it is it's got line wrapped in there, and then it's basically shrink tube over the top, and it gives you a really good handle, and it makes it, for me, just much easier to use this. And this is just like a normal ceramic rod. It's got a stop in it here, so you can use it this way. And for me, like a dirty knife when I'm field dressing, this is easier to use. I don't need a guided sharpener. I can kind of feel my angle. So if that's you, this thing's pretty handy. You can use it this way. A lot of times I will use it this way. I'll put in like an inch, and then I'll push down here, and then I'll sharpen on that. So just a shameless plug for mine if you want a unguided one. So I think that covers like new stuff. New gear I use. Let me see if I got something else on that front. A couple observations. I actually had Gary was talking about it when we did our call in the paid group, and we talked about the Sig Zulu 6s. So as I've guided, so these are the image stabilized binoculars. You guys see me talk about them all the time. I used them a lot in September, to the extent that one like when I was guiding a rifle, I had a 1 week where I was guiding rifles during a rut elk hunt. It's kind of a unique tag situation, but during that hunt, I still use my Sig Zulu 6s just because I'm getting addicted to the image stabilization. But my wife happened to be with me, and all she did was carry my range-finding binoculars. So I still find when I'm guiding rifle hunts, it's annoying not to have the rangefinder. But reflecting on the conversation that I had with Gary in the paid group a couple days ago, and we went back and forth a little bit on it, I hope I didn't mislead any folks on the Sig Zulu 6s, because and I think I mentioned this passively, but maybe didn't focus on it enough. You have to be very cognizant that what Sig is doing is they're putting higher magnifications in these binoculars with the same objective size. So when you get into that 16 by 42 and the 20 by 42 with the Sig Zulu 6s. Now the new ones they just put out, I'm sure people will ask about that. The new ones that people just put out, they're better on what I'm about to talk about because they're a bigger objective. They're not 42 millimeters. They're bigger, but that also means they're heavier. It means they're bulkier. So we'll just stick to the Sig Zulu 6s. The Sig Zulu 6s that I've used a ton and reviewed a ton, they're using the same objective as you go up magnification. And the reason they're going up magnification is because a lot of people can use them at the higher magnifications in their hand because of the stabilization technology. But the giant downside is what Gary ran into, and that's that when you get into 16 by 42s, 20 by 42s, the exit pupil, that, you know, just how much light gathering there is in the binoculars, and plus you have to factor in that they're not a super high-end binocular in terms of the glass. I would call them like mid-tier binoculars. Like maybe if they were out there and they didn't have image stabilization, they'd be in, you know, they might be only a $300 binocular, $350 binocular. I don't know, but I'm guessing they're in that realm, right? They're not a multiple $1,000 binocular. When you add that to the fact they don't have the light gathering at those higher magnifications, you're going to get really, really poor low light performance. And that, I just want everybody to understand that and understand the trade-off you're making if you go with the higher magnification binoculars. I don't think I probably didn't go over that as well as I should have, as I've been a very big proponent of the binoculars overall. So just wanted to mention that. And hopefully that'll help people's decision-making process. If you're doing hunting where low light is not a big deal, yeah, go with the higher magnification. Awesome. But if you're going, you know, doing hunting that low light is really important, just realize even with the 12 by 42s, really the lowest magnification I would recommend with those binoculars, you're still not going to have the low light performance that you're going to have with, you know, Swarovski 8 by 42s or 10 by 42s. One, they've got better optical, the glass is better in them, but also you just functionally they're gathering more light. So consider that in your choices. If you're hunting, you know, elk that are basically nocturnal, mule deer that are basically nocturnal, to get the crap hunted out of them, be wary about going with the higher magnifications because the game time is going to be always low light. Alrighty, let's see here. Oh, the other one that I ran into, I've been telling everybody to buy Hatch. Well, I don't tell people to buy them, but they're what I use, the Hatch bipod, which is ridiculously expensive. And one of my big reasons for saying that is that I can shoot kneeling and I can shoot like in a, basically like an Indian style position, right, with my elbows in. And I can use that bipod because it gets to the height. And for a ton of my clients, same deal. You know, guys from 5 foot to 6 foot, they can shoot prone all the way up to that kneeling position. Awesome. I ran into it because I was guiding a couple bigger guys this hunting season. If you're in that like 6'1", 6'2" and bigger range, it won't work. It won't work for you in that kneeling or seated position. So keep that in mind. And as a matter of fact, if it's not going to work for you at that position, it might be more useful to go to a smaller bipod, just because it's going to be smaller, more compact on your gun, and you're still going to be able to get prone. You're still going to be able to shoot prone out of it. There's no point in carrying a longer, heavier bipod that you still can't shoot seated. You still can't shoot, seated or kind of Indian style-ish. There's no point having that if you're too tall to shoot that position. You might as well just have the bipod that covers prone. And so just something to think about. And I wanted to let you guys know of on that front. All right, so let's see here. Yeah, I've noticed on a couple of the platforms that some more people have joined. Stick your name in the comments or in the chat or whatever, just so I have it for the raffle of this of the gear I'm going to give away. I'll give it away in a short video on the Mighty Network. just right after we're done with this, but put your name in there so I've got it. I do very few endorsement deals, and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. I'll stick a link right here where you can sign up. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There's a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. All right, let's see here. I think that covers this stuff. Yeah, sweet. Okay, gear. All right, so I'll just jump into submitted questions here, guys. And feel free, if I'm answering your question, just to hit up the chat. Tell me if I'm off base or you want me to go in more in depth in the aspect of it. So thanks, Dave. Let's see here. Ron Irvine, last season or late season, post-rut, November, December, elk hunting tactics, Roosevelt and Rocky Mountain elk. So this is going to be across subspecies. So post-rut elk, they all do the same thing. They go somewhere to recover. You guys have probably heard this. You got to consider they've lost, you know, a 800-pound bull elk, a 750-pound bull elk. He's going to lose 100 pounds in September. I've seen bulls do this. I've seen a bull in the beginning of September look awesome, and then 25 days later look like holy hell. He's lost 100 pounds. They've usually got several abscesses on them from getting stuck and gored and all of that. I don't think there's a bull I caped out in the last 3 weeks that I didn't, you know, while I was caping them on their neck and stuff, didn't run into an active infection from them fighting and beating the crap out of each other. So they've got that. They've lost weight. They've got to get somewhere where they can recover before the winter. So that means they got to have, you know, basically cover, feed, and water. And they like it to be in seclusion, particularly if they get hunted at all, they're going to be in very secluded spots. And I'll kind of talk about what that looks like to me. But the key component of this that you have to get in your mind is that these spots can be super, super small. I mean, I've seen bulls and I've seen groups of bachelor bulls during this period of time that will not leave a 300-yard, 500-yard radius. So you have to kind of key in on spots that have shelter, feed, and water within a little contained, secluded spot like that. So a lot of times, if the weather allows them to, it'll be fairly high elevation. It'll be like in a tight draw, in the head of that draw, or down somewhere secluded in that draw. And they'll stay right there. The good thing is they tend to go back to these spots year after year. Even if those bulls get killed, other bulls find those spots, other bulls grow up, you know, hanging in those spots within bachelor groups or whatever. So they're pretty consistent year to year. But when you're trying to find them, a lot of times, particularly in areas where the elk are basically nocturnal, and a lot of you guys who have been hunting, you know, public land lately, particularly because it's been warm, you know that all these elk become essentially nocturnal once they get hunted so hard. It's usually hard to glass these elk up. I'll give you some thoughts on how to do that, but a lot of times you're going to find them by sign. So you've got to be able to identify a bull track. You've got to be able to identify bull crap. And then you got to be able to identify that it's fresh or not. And I get questions on that, on the freshness. And I've got a video that's being edited right now that just goes. It's like, I'm going to call it like the ultimate guide to elk sign. And so I go over this a bit in there, but I don't go over, you know, what fresh sign looks like that much because it's pretty obvious. You know what I mean? There's not, you know. Once sign in a dry, arid environment, I'll grant that once sign is 2 weeks old or a week and a half old, it's hard to tell if it's 2 weeks old or if it's 2 months old, but who cares? For the application we're talking about, you have to find like slimy, green, squishy, fresh elk sign, right? So the minute it's dried out, it's got a husk on it, any of that, when you step on it, it doesn't squish. It's kind of too old to be relevant in these situations. So that's the kind of sign that you need to find these little holes. In terms of glassing them, if you have no prior knowledge or no, catalog of things, they're generally going to be hard to glass if they're in areas that get hunted a fair amount. And so they're not going to be holes that you can glass off the road. Typically, they're going to be, you have to do two things. You're either going to have to hike in to a point where you can glass into these spots, these little nooks and crannies. It's a fairly inefficient approach to doing it because you lose some of the effectiveness of basically hiking with your binoculars, right? Or hiking by saving hiking in terms of effort, energy, and time, and glassing. It doesn't work out if you're having to hike to go in there and glass one little nook and cranny during the prime time when those bulls might be up. But sometimes you have to do that, and you have to narrow down little spots. You have to climb up spots off of the road. If you're in an area with a big road system, it's generally what you're gonna have to do, right? You might try to check 5, 6 of them in the morning, so it means you're gonna have to be quick about it, right? So you're gonna go climb up, look down in that crack that nobody else can see if there's bulls in there. Go to the next spot. You can do that as a glassing strategy. The other strategy, if your optics you have allow this, like you got big optics, you got good optics, and there's not a ton of snow, so you can't get up at the high elevations. My suggestion is to get as high as possible, because the higher you get, even late into the rifle seasons, I'm talking like, maybe you got to chain up and you got to go through a foot of snow for 2 miles on a road or whatever. If you're capable of doing that, you can get to a glassing spot. And yeah, you might be in an area where all the elk have moved out, but you can glass down into the secluded little pockets where these bulls are hanging out if you have a bunch of elevation. So that's another way to do it. And in that situation, you are picking up the effectiveness of glassing instead of hiking around everywhere. The other thing is if you do have snow, these pockets are really easy to find, or much easier to find, because you can glass for tracks. So it's a good bet. It's kind of analogous to, people ask me when they're mountain goat hunting, they ask me, well, or you can look up on the mountain, are those billies or are those nannies? Well, I can look at the terrain that a goat's in and be 80%, 90% sure that's either a billy or a nanny, just because I know billies like certain type of rugged crap versus nannies that tend to like more mellow country, at least in the spectrum of mountain goats. There's an analogy here with elk. If you're up in one of these high spots in the snow and you're looking down into a little hole, you see some tracks and kind of some gnarly, secluded little hole. You see some elk tracks and you're looking at them from 800 yards away with your spotting scope or whatever. Most likely, those are bull tracks. They're the time frame that we're talking about that Ron brought up here, post-rut stuff. Those are generally not cow-calf tracks, right? The cows and calves, they tend to go down earlier. They tend to go to more mild terrain. If you're finding those little holes and you find some elk tracks, you glass up some elk tracks, typically they're going to be bulls. That's going to be a bull spot. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that, Ron. All right, let's see here. Oh, this is kind of a funny one. Travis says, most outlandish and weirdly creative ways people have tried and failed to bend hunting laws. Man, I don't know that I've really had weird, really weird ones. I've had some odd ones that I thought were kind of curious that people would attempt. You know what I mean? I for sure have had people shoot multiple elk. Like there's 3 cow tags in a camp, and then I go in there, I pack them out, and I can see there's birds. There's birds out there, and so I'm like, hey, is there like something dead over there, guys? I go over and check. There's another dead cow, and they only had 3 tags, and they claim that wasn't them, but it happened to be right around where they killed the other 3 cows. They've been the only ones in the area. I've had that kind of situation several times. Some people just don't know. I think unfortunately some people don't realize that they killed an extra one until it's brought up. So I've had that situation arise. The biggest one that I've had, Travis, and this has more to do with that I dealt with a crowd. A lot of my clientele were from all different states and had to deal with a huge catalog what was legal here, there, whatever. And that's it. I've just had a lot of guys pushing technology, like what's allowed and what's not. Okay, can I use thermals? Okay, can I have a thermal on my rifle, but can I not use it, and can I only use it to scout? Like these kind of things, there's always people trying to figure out some creative way around the technology stuff, which I think is kind of crazy. But yeah, that's usually where people try to like squirm around the laws, and it's like, look, there's like, because some of these laws on the technology front, they're always changing a little bit. It may seem like there's gray area, but believe me, there's no point in like trying to wedge yourself into the gray area for some advantage. You're just gonna end up in trouble. So yeah, no, I've had a few of those. I'll have to think about a little bit on that one too, like in terms of outlandish things. It's funny because I think this is amongst friend groups too, but it applies to outfitting and guiding. People will test you, right? They'll test you on game regulations to see if you're willing to tolerate it. And if you basically have like a no tolerance policy, or you give that vibe to clients or your hunting partners or whatever, they just don't go there. So that I guess that's my recommendation. If you're amongst buddies or whatever, everybody should try to follow the rules as much as they can. Just give out that vibe, and you got to deal with it. You know what I mean? People understand you're not gonna deal with goofiness on that front. Again, guys, I see there's a few more people now. 5 or 6 people showed up. Throw your name in the chat or Patreon in the comments or whatever, so I can add you into the raffle for the tripod, the ball head, and some merchandise I'm gonna give away after the live stream. All right, let's see here. Yeah, guys, and if I've answered a few here, and I've got like a ton of good ones, but I feel like I have the chat under control a little bit better today because I've got something aggregated all in one spot. So if there's any questions, guys, that people didn't submit, you're welcome to throw them in the chat, and I'll get to them. Tommy Phipps, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, Tommy. When do you give up when tracking a herd of elk during an archery hunt or any hunt? This burned me this season. Spent way too much time tracking a herd that was vocal for the first week and then shut up and holed up into extreme steep and thick timber for the next couple weeks. Out before I moved. Tons of fresh sign, but they just weren't talking or coming out during the shooting hours and locations. So I get questions like this or related questions a lot, Tommy. What I would say is it really depends on what other options you have, right? I know it's not probably the answer you're looking for, but it does matter a lot. Like the situation that you described, right? You're in an area, there was elk there, they were vocal for a while. Now they're still there because you have fresh sign, but they're not vocalizing how they were, and it sounds like they're in terrain that they're probably a bitch to hunt them in, right? Probably that it's hard to be quiet in the thick timber, the wind's bad, probably all of those things, right? So you've run into that. Now, if you're in an area, an over-the-counter unit or something like that, I'd say, well, you probably didn't make a mistake. You know what I mean? You'd probably, as long as the elk weren't boogered by you, recently, and even if they were sticking around and you boogered them once or twice, but they're still there and you're seeing sign, I'd probably still say this. If you're in an over-the-counter area where 90% of the battle is finding elk, I'd say you probably didn't make a mistake. Just keep hunting them, right? Because if you keep hunting them, you run into situations that give you an opportunity to kill one, even in tough situations, right? And I'll dive a little bit more on that. Now, if you're in an area that's got an abundance of elk, other groups of elk, you can find elk in a half day, another 24 hours or whatever, then yeah, you have to basically handicap that, right? And probably the one biggest variable in those situations that is relevant is if you're observing the elk for a day or two, and they're in a situation and they're patterning and moving in a certain way that the wind gives you no options, then move on. There's a a lot of different things you can do if like it's touchy, if they're gonna see you if you move through, you know, this meadow, or you've got to move in there at night because, you know, they move first thing in the morning, you know, right at dark. They're basically nocturnal, so you got to move in there. You're gonna be loud, you know, those sort of things. Those factors don't matter that much, or I shouldn't say they're worth taking the risk a lot of the time. If the wind's shitty and you just cannot, they're gonna get your wind regardless of how you look at it. Then in those situations where you can figure out a new spot to go do the you know, go find a new spot, right, and cut your losses early if that's the case. Now, if you're in the former situation where, you know, you're in an area where you found elk and it really doesn't make sense for you to, you know, roll the dice and try to find other elk, because it might take you 2 days, it might take the rest of the hunt, you may never see another elk in the unit. In those situations, I think there's a couple things you can do. One, you got to strategize about, okay, there's lots of different ways to kill elk that aren't vocalizing, right? You can go to spot and stalk, you can sit on water, you can try to pattern that way. The other thing you can do is you can do calling strategies that tend to work a little bit better on quiet elk. Like one of those is actually, I put a video up a couple weeks ago, that calf calling strategy. If you're hearing calves at all, but I didn't mention it in that video, but you can attempt that even if you have a feeling there's elk around, but they're not vocalizing. A lot of times if you do calf elk sequences, you'll rally up calves. They'll either show up or they'll start to vocalize even if you haven't heard them for weeks. So you can try strategies like that. The other thing you can do is you can try like dry calling setups. They do work for a lot of people. It's not something I do a lot of, but a lot of guys in those situations, they'll get as close as possible to elk. They'll rake, they'll bugle. You know, sometimes they'll just rake. They just try to figure out what works, what catches the interest of the bulls within that group who are being secluded, quiet, whatever, with cows. So you got to kind of, you know, try those other strategies. The other thing is sometimes it's just time. You know, it could be that you're looking at them and it's that situation. You found elk. There's no point in leaving them because you may not find any other elk. They're in a situation where their daily pattern, they're mostly nocturnal, but when they're moving, the wind's horrible, you can't get in there. Sometimes you just got to wait it out. There's usually some weakness in their situation that weakness may only arise due to environmental variables, right? So storm moves in. All of a sudden, there's a prevailing wind that dominates the thermals, and those thermals have been protecting them. Now you can be dependent on that prevailing wind. You can go in their spot and stalk and shoot one, right? The other thing is if you're around elk long enough and you're staying in there close to them, you can wake up one morning and elk that are totally non-vocal will start to go ballistic. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, that's because a cow came into estrus. Maybe, right? That does trigger them. I'll tell you the other thing that triggers them is if 2 or 3 other bulls show up. 2 or 3 other bulls show up from somewhere else overnight. Could be, you know, it could be another herd bull, could be raghorns, whatever. You get a higher density of bulls in an area all of a sudden, and they'll pop. They'll be more vocal if you're there at that time. So sometimes you just gotta kind of go with the flow on it. Let's see here. I've got a note from Jose Flores, and this kind of related, so I think there'll be some overlap here. What is the plan if elk didn't talk all season or moved around in light to glass? I sat and waited in spots, hiked around up and down, changed location, elk sign everywhere, just got wore out this season. Got down a bit, but remembered your video and kept going. So yeah, good to hear, Jose. And this is the game kind of with pressured elk, is that you're gonna have a lot of this because they become nocturnal, right? So I guess the first question I would have for you is, I guess there's a couple tactical things, right? They're basically nocturnal. You know they're there because of fresh sign, but you're not finding them and you're not finding a way to kill them. Probably the outside of what I just mentioned in response to Tommy's question, which is very analogous, what I would say is that you've got to find where they're bedded to truly know if they're not moving at all during light, right? So if you know where they're bedded, then it's pretty rare, to be honest. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's pretty rare that if you know where elk are bedded and you move in there in the dark, or you get in there, towards it's shooting light in the afternoon, close to nighttime, when they just get up. They don't move to feed until like 10 minutes before it's pitch black outside. You're not going to know that unless you figure out exactly where they're bedded and you get really close and observe that. A lot of times in the situations you're talking about, that's when you're going to kill them. You're going to kill them because they're coming back to their beds really, really early. Like you might have just 30 minutes, and then same thing in the afternoon. They're not getting up until 30 minutes. So that's the opportunity you have to get in their path, call them, get in their path and ambush them, spot and stalk them, whatever. Like that's your only opportunity. The reason I mention it is because a lot of elk that are super, super nocturnal, that are getting hunted all the time, they're moving really long distances at night. You'd be very surprised. They might be moving 2 miles through the timber, 3 miles through the timber in the pitch black dark. They might be moving 2-3 miles in the wide open. They're just doing it right at night. And so therefore you're seeing the sign, but where the fresh sign is, that's not really where they're susceptible to being harvested, right? Because you're just seeing the sign, but they're actually bedding, and the movement that they do have where they're susceptible during the shooting light is actually pretty far away from where you're at. So I would consider that. Alrighty, let's see here. Kyle Roberts had one. What about hide preservation when at spike camp with the intent to stay out for several more days before returning to the truck or base camp? Yes, this is a good question, Kyle. And I've done a lot of this historically. It's really interesting because it's not in the culture of hunters and it's not in the culture of guides in the States to know how to salt hides, know how to turn hides, that sort of thing. In Canada, it is. So I think it's just a function of true remoteness, and I guess like true remoteness is not the right term. Just remoteness that has practical implications. So in Canada, British Columbia, or other places in Canada, you can be on a very good 50-foot wide gravel logging road that you can go 55 miles on, 55 miles per hour on, but you can be 6 hours away from any town, right, or any taxidermist. So there's the culture of doing this. There are, of course, applications to it in the States too. And then there's also the function that a lot of us just want to know how to do it. It's fun, right? So I got lucky because I got exposed to it when I was doing a bunch of hunting in Canada around a lot of guys that did it. So all you have to do if you're doing capes or you're doing hides on ungulates, deer and elk, moose, whatever, or if you're doing bear hides, what you have to learn how to do is you have to learn how to, like if you're doing just throw hides, right? Like you're just skinning a whitetail, you're just skinning an elk, and you're just going to use the hide for a throw. It's super easy. All you have to do is be very careful how you skin the animal in the fall in particular. Like if you skin cow elk, right, and you're very meticulous that you don't leave a bunch of muscle on there. The little thin membranes, contrary to what you'll hear, they're not that big a deal for salting. They're not a big deal at all. But the meat is, right? So meat, fat, you got to skin that stuff where it stays on the body, stays on the meat. But a lot of times, if that's what you're doing, you don't have the hooves on there, you don't have the paws on there, you don't have the head on there, and because that's where the thickness is, right? The lips, around the eyes, in the ears. There's stuff in there you got to deal with if you're going to salt. If you're not doing that and you're not doing the paws or hooves, you just got the hide, just clean skin it, and then look at it. If there's any meat, flesh, whatever that's thicker than say like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch or whatever, flesh that off. I never use a fleshing knife in the field. I shouldn't say that. Like I'll if fall bears, I would use a fleshing knife in the field. I don't run into it a lot because I'm not doing fall bear hunts that are real remote. Most of the remote bear hunts I do are in the spring. But if you're doing fall bear hunts where bears are real fat and that sort of thing, you're going to have to get a fleshy knife. But that's the exception to this, right? You really can just salt them like that. And what I use is you just want to get fine grain stock salt that doesn't have any additives in it. And it's harder to do that than it should be nowadays. A lot of times you're going to find some salt that has a non-caking agent in it. That's not ideal. You can use it. I've used it and it hasn't been a problem. It kind of stains the hide a little bit, but it hasn't been an issue. But the thing is, you can go into a grocery store and just like the little Morton salts, the uniodized version, I mean, you can just get a bunch of those. And yeah, it's not the cheapest way to buy it, but salt's still pretty cheap. Do those, salt it in the field, rub that salt in, and you can keep elk, deer hides, bear hides, and stuff in a camp for 7, 8, 10 days. Honestly, you can keep them in there indefinitely. But once the moisture rises, you got to wipe the salt off and then resalt them. But if you're just doing it to hold you over in camp, just put that salt on there. It changes the pH of all that moisture, as long as you're getting all the moisture salted. And once that pH changes, the bacterial growth doesn't occur. So even if it's like kind of the salt's a little nasty, like it seems moist, you can still get away with it for multiple days. But if you don't want to do that forever. So if we're in a camp for 2 weeks, right? You'd wipe off that wet salt and resalt it, and then you're gonna have it where it's not pulling up. It's just dry now, right? And then you can roll them when they're still soft. Matter of fact, people tend to make the mistake on salted hides of rolling them when they're trying to roll them once they're too dry. You want to roll them when they still have a little pliability, because that salt will continue to work and continue to dry them out. If you start trying to roll them when they're dry, you tend to crack them and beat them up. You almost have to like rehydrate them if you get to that point. So yeah, Kyle, hopefully that helps you on that front. Holy smokes, guys, we already did an hour. I'm gonna answer a couple more, but I did want to mention, because I've been getting a bunch of questions on it, seminars and hunts next year. So I have a bunch of cool ones that are in the pipeline, and I was kind of frustrated going into this year because I was looking for availability for certain types of seminars and hunts to do with not necessarily like brand new hunters, but guys that watch my channel that are in the network, guys that want to learn on hunts, kind of across the spectrum, but of course, like for sure, some more beginner hunters. Like cow elk was on that list. Doing a wilderness bull elk deal was on that list. Those are kind of hard hunts to figure out. I figured those out for 2025. So in 2025, I'm going to do spring bear in Idaho. I'm going to do summer bear in Alaska, probably fall bear in Colorado. And that fall bear hunt in Colorado is going to be awesome. I've been working on the details on that. I've got a cow elk option set up, and then the bull elk wilderness deal, I'm still working on that one. But within that, for sure, I've got some cool things. Now, the biggest critique I have for myself for the hunt/seminars that I did in 2024 is it was very hard for me to do them where I felt like they were the right amount of value for guys that the hunt was still really important, right? So I either felt like I shorted the seminar side of it, or I felt like I was digging in to people's hunt by doing them both together. And I thought that would be easy. I thought that'd be very doable. Turned out it was a lot harder than I thought. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to still do, like on the straight seminar stuff, like the one that I worked with Cade on that he did in Wyoming. We're going to do more of that, and that's just no hunt component, right? We're just going to do an elk hunting camp. That we're going to do the same way. The ones that are a seminar/hunt, what I'm going to do is like the formal syllabus, the classroom stuff, I'm going to do it online. I'm going to do it on the Mighty Network. And so that's going to be like, it'll be on there, and it's going to involve meeting, for a series of weeks, once a week probably, depending on, I'll figure out what schedule works for people. But say everybody's going, like I got 10 guys that are going on the fall bear hunt in Colorado. We're going to do, a weekly session for 8 weeks, before the hunt sometime, right? Probably not right up against the hunt just because like logistics of the hunting season, but we'll do those. So, we're going to cover a bunch of stuff, but we'll also do like hunt prep during those, the online part of it. And then the hunt will be primarily the hunt, and then it'll be more of a casual integration of, in-person learning, right? The only exception to that will be we'll still do the marksmanship stuff, so rifle shooting, all of that stuff that I did during those seminars, hunts. We'll still do that as a separate in-person session on those deals. But the way I'm going to do it is the online part of those hunts, I'm going to set it up so they can be purchased separately, right? If that's all you want to do, or you just can't go on the hunt because of logistics, cost, whatever, I'll still have that available so you can participate in that if you want. In that, you can learn the same stuff as the guys that are going on the hunt. And then you'll be also able to obviously purchase both together. And that's, that'll be the hunt package, right? Will be the online seminar component of it and the hunt. So just wanted to mention to you guys, that's how I'm going to do them in 2025. I'll put more details out as they do it, but I've got some pretty cool ones in. Yeah, for sure, Jesse. Nice to see you on here too, man. Let's see here, guys. Let me pop open the questions here because I know there's a bunch of good ones, and I'm gonna answer a couple more. Let's do Dan's. So Dan says, during warm and dry late seasons like we are having this year, do you expect bulls to be up around tree line like they would be during the earlier seasons, Colorado 3rd and 4th season? So yeah, Dan, in a general sense, yes. But the thing is there's a dynamic that exists with this whole elevation thing that I think is interesting, to say the least, right? And what's weird is it's changed a lot during my lifetime and then my exposure to elk hunting. So I guided a hunt, well, I shouldn't say that. I was on the, I helped a native guide a hunt on the Hickory Apache Reservation last week, right? Primarily a winter range area. It is loaded with elk right now, even though it's 85 degrees there. And personally, I think it's loaded with elk that probably some of them summer in the San Juans. They have a big resident elk population, but the density of elk is insane right now, right? And so the question is, I know that's changed a little bit over time, why are these elk all already on the winter range in September 25th or whatever, right? Or at least part of them are. And I think the reason is just hunting pressure. So to answer your question, I saw this in the flat tops too. A bunch of elk on September 10th are beelining to the private. So it depends a little bit on the dynamic, right? Of like why they're actually moving. If you're in an area where they only move due to the weather, due to feed limitations, right? Like they're mountain elk, and the only time they're going to leave the true high country is if they run out of feed up there. It's not pressure related. Then yeah, what you're talking about, like absolutely, just go as high as you can. They tend to be up there, particularly like post-rut bulls. They'll tend to stick as high as they can. All other variables held equal. Part of that, I think, part of that is feed availability, seclusion, and then I personally think a big part of it is bugs. They just don't like bugs. So if they can get up somewhere where it's cooler at night, they've got a mountain breeze all the time, the bugs don't drive them as crazy. So I think in that scenario, that's the case. But if you're in a situation where pressure is a gigantic variable, which is, it's a lot of the places that we're talking about in Colorado and beyond, then you're going to still have the same dynamic. There's already a bunch of elk that are already on winter ranges in, areas I used to hunt, 25, 26, 34, 35. A lot of the private's already loaded with elk, even though it's 80 degrees outside right now. So that kind of stuff is just not going to... Basically what I'm saying, in those scenarios, it doesn't even matter. You know what I mean? it doesn't matter if it's warm, hot, or whatever. A lot of those elk have moved a certain way anyways. So yeah, guys, that is it. We did a good hour, I believe. Yeah. All right. Cool. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you chiming in. I will get off of here and I will do the raffle. I'll post it on the Mighty Network. So get on there in half hour, and if it's you, I'll message you. Send me your address. I'll send it to you on the merchandise, like my hat and shirt, whatever you guys want, like color wise or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I'll have it sent to you. And then one last time, guys, anybody who has jumped on here, if you're on the Patreon group still, Mighty Network, or on YouTube watching this, stick your name in the chat or in the comments below what you're watching, and I will make sure to include you in the raffle. So yeah, guys, appreciate it. Thanks.